Hey, Shazia. So I'd love to talk about narrative in this conversation. The narrative that we find ourselves caught up in. And I noticed this myself the other day. I noticed got a lot on, and I noticed myself continuing to say, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed." And I sort of caught myself because I think I've been saying it for quite a while, and someone pointed it out to me like that I keep saying it, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I'm living in a story that I'm overwhelmed. And so I sort of noticed that, and I've stopped. I've just stopped using the language, and what we know about the power of our thoughts and the power of our words to chemically create something in the brain that either energizes and enables us or shuts us down. And so I've been exploring this with clients a little bit over the last few weeks. Is like, what narrative are you living in? What are you continuing to say about yourself? And it might be, oh, I'm not very confident, or I'm not very good at presenting to the board, or like I'm having a difficult time at the moment in life, and it's like. For myself, I noticed how boring I was. Like, how are you? Oh, I'm overwhelmed. Like, oh God, there he goes again. And so I'm like, I'm just wanted to invite myself in this, but also our listeners in this to just notice the narrative that they might be caught up in. Yeah, just there you go. Over to you.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's such an important topic. And I think for me, as you were talking, what came up there was I used to have this idea in my mind that we used words to describe how things are, right? So I'm overwhelmed. I used to think like, oh, that's just a description. It's just a fact, right? I'm overwhelmed. It's the truth. And so I would think of language as descriptive. And over the last couple of years, I've been playing with this idea that you just touched on, that every time we speak, we are creating. And it's like language, when I say I'm overwhelmed, I'm creating overwhelm. I'm creating that I am overwhelmed. And if I do that over and over and over again for a consistent period of time, I'm going to start to believe that I'm someone who's just an overwhelmed person. I'm going to start to think that's part of who I am, part of my identity, part of my personality. Oh, it's just who I am. I'm just overwhelmed. And it's like actually what I didn't realize and have since kind of really enjoyed playing with is what if every time I'm saying it, I'm creating it? And if that's true, then I get to create something different by choosing different language. And it sounds kind of like trite and specific and it's just not. Like we use language every time we think in language. Every time we speak in language. Every time you write, we write in language, right? So it's everywhere, it's all around us. So I love what you're pointing to there, that we get to choose what language we use because the language that we use literally creates our experience of ourselves and of life.
Yes. I agree with that. And what I'm conscious of for myself and for potential listeners is like we're not necessarily then talking about just saying the opposite and thinking or saying something that isn't authentic to us. Step number one is just stop using the word overwhelm. And step number two, then I'm curious on your view on this, is like what can I say that actually feels authentic to me, that is empowering and inspiring me?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that distinction and I'm glad you mentioned that. Just before we got on this call earlier today, I was with a client and I noticed this happening in real time. And so we were talking about how um, he tends to act out of urgency and like he'll have an email pop up at 6 p.m. and it will be like, absolutely have to deal with this now. I can't possibly wait until tomorrow. And so we were coaching on that and we were talking on that. And one thing that he kept saying a lot of times was, yeah, it's really difficult. It's going to be really hard for me to change that. And I'm just hardwired this way. And yeah, it's really hard. And so that was a moment where I really clocked onto his language about he's creating that it's hard. And what I offered there for him was like, it's the three magic words that I love to use up until now. And it's like, it's not negating anything that he's experiencing or like making this change is something that's going to be a long, hard slog. It's like, hey, that's a the mind is like Google. It will show you exactly what it is that you're searching for. So if I'm typing in, this is going to take me a long time to crack, what I'm going to come out with 100,000 results from my mind of evidence and data to prove that it's going to take me a long time to crack. That makes sense. And so for me, looking at things through a slightly different lens, like up until now, I have experienced this. I'm open to experiencing something different. I used to be a person who would get really fixated on how overwhelmed I was feeling in a moment. I wonder who I'm going to be now, or I wonder what else there is for me to see. That's one really simple shift in creating it as something that is because it's true. It's what you're feeling right now. I'm in a temporary state of overwhelm. I wonder what's next. I wonder what else there is. It doesn't make it any less. It's not a fabrication, but it's the language is shifting out of limitation into possibility. And when we shift our language into possibility, even if we don't know what that state looks like yet, we're essentially opening a door to see something that we don't yet see. And that's just one example. So I'd love to hear from you, like what else comes to mind for you around how you can shift your language in a way that feels really authentic.
Well, I'm just reflecting on the I feel overwhelmed or this is going to be really hard. It's what we're experiencing, but it's subjective. It's purely subjective. And so the inquiry that I'm interested in then is like, is that really true? Is that really true? Or is because we get caught in patterns of language and we say things and like if I actually stop and go, is doing this email, do I absolutely have to do it tonight? And is it really going to be hard? And sometimes we have experiences like we think something's going to be hard and so we put it off. And then we get around to doing it and it was like, oh, that only took me like 20 minutes. And I think that's another example where, like, I think I'm inviting all who are listening and myself to just go, hang on a second, is this really true? Is there another way that I could frame this that feels authentic, that would inspire and energize me? And just to build on that, the other thing I love playing with, I wrote on this recently actually, is I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is like I love I love playing with words and looking at how they feel. So if I say to you the word Shazia, this is going to be a disaster. The word disaster has some feeling that you feel it, right? It's like disaster. We're not going to get out of this. This is gonna go horribly wrong. And the whole body feels that. Versus the opposite, which is, I don't know how we're going to get out of it, but this is going to be an amazing story. We're going to end up being more successful than you can ever believe. I have no idea how yet, but we're going to do this. And just like the feeling there, it's like, I mean, I'm feeling myself. I'm like, great, let's bring it on.
And there's a truth in that as well, right? So whatever it is that we look at is growing, whatever it is that we focus on expands. So if that's your mentality, if that's how you're showing up to a really difficult challenge, God, this is going to create something really amazing for us. This is going to be an adventure. I have no idea how we're going to get there, but we are. That's the direction that you and anyone, any of your colleagues, your team, whatever, that's the direction you're all looking in. That's the focus. We are going to get through this in an exciting, energizing way. that becomes bigger. That starts to grow. The awareness starts to expand. And that's when I say it becomes a reality, like that's what we're pointing to give you a really obvious example of this, right? Last year, I bought a Nissan Leaf. Before that, I didn't even know the Nissan Leaf was a car, let alone would I be able to recognize it anywhere. I buy the car, and before you know it, like I'm walking around seeing this car everywhere I go, right? We've all had some experience of that. It's not a coincidence. It happens because my mind is focused on something and that grows. And so I love what you're saying there, that you get to empower yourself, literally empower yourself, as in literally create more power just by switching the language in the direction that you're focused.
Wonderful. So is there anything else that you think we should capture in this video on this topic before we close it?
Maybe just an invitation to our listeners to catch your language, catch the narrative that you are telling yourself, because they can be really insidious. They can be really subtle. We often, it's like something that feels so obvious and so true for us that we don't even notice we're doing it. And so the invitation I would like to make is notice today, right? Let's reduce the gap between you hearing something here that's useful and you actually taking action on it. So at some point today, just start to listen for the language that you're using and the narrative that you're following for yourself, the things that you think are true that may not be true, right? Don't believe everything you think. Question that and see where that takes you. See what else there is in that for you.
Wonderful. Great. Good challenge. Yeah, love it. Thank you so much. This has been really great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Martin.